Hello and welcome. I am Esther. I am Peter's AI assistant to create voiceovers. I will simply read Peter's blog posts so that you have a choice of reading the blog post or listening to my voice. Hello and welcome, gentlemen. I thought I would create a blog post with a summary of my resume in it so that anyone who does not know me can check out this online resume. I will present this resume as a narrative of my experience rather than as a normal resume. This is because this is more normal for videos. You can get a copy of my client resume from my freebies document. That is a more normal resume you would use for reviewing a person's professional career. Most people who have been in data warehousing more than 20 years already know me. For the last 15 years, I have not been such a public figure due to my woke cancellation for defending the rights of men and boys. Pretty much any man who stands up for the rights of men and boys has had his life destroyed by lies and slander over the last 30 years or so. All our ladies have supported the lies and slander of men who defended men and boys. Personally, I think that is sad that our ladies did that. But they did. Now that Donald Trump is in the White House and has declared that the U.S. government will return to hiring on merit, I think there is a good chance that men will decide that it is time to put an end to woke cancellations. We will see if this turns out to be the case. As a result of all this, I am stepping back into the public domain to promote my free software. We will see if men want to use my software for free. So, I will start this resume narrative in 1989 when I was 25. I was the system architect for a $4 million 400 work month project that was being developed in the International Development Laboratory of IBM Australia. I was the youngest system architect ever in IBM Australia. Many men much older than me protested my promotion because they felt they were better qualified for the job. Many of them had a very good case as being better qualified as well. At that time, the next youngest system architect in my area was 35. The system I was system architect for was the 4.0 version of a pricing application that retrieved prices for IBM products and services. It was to be installed into 25 countries including Australia, Japan, and Canada. So in 1989 terms, it was quite a major system development effort that I was the technical lead on. I had 12 men in my team working on it. So, that is the starting point I want to have for this resume. In December 1989, I made the decision to leave software development as a career and become a salesman. In 1990, I was invited to come to the IBM Santa Teresa laboratory just north of San Jose in California. This was well known as the home of DB2. In 1989, I had written the large portion of the IBM product called Software Configuration and Library Management. For short, we will call it SCLM. For those who do not know what that is, you can consider that it was the IBM equivalent of the Make program on Unix. Of course, it is 100 times more complicated than Make, because IBM mainframes are a far more complicated environment with many more source code types. Because I had written so much of the code and invented the idea that made it useful, I was invited to co-author a book on SCLM. Towards the end of the writing of the book, I was invited to come to NASA. An old friend of mine was working there. She asked me to help design the source code management system for the 800 IBM programmers working on the software development for the International Space Station. My ideas were adopted by NASA. Because of this, I quickly became IBM world famous. Soon afterwards, the Federal Aviation Authority moved their software development to SCLM. I was asked to serve on the steering committee for the product. By the time I resigned from IBM in 1994, SCLM was one of the most successful product rollouts in the history of IBM. Presumably, all the code I wrote has now been replaced. But in IBM, I was widely known as Mr. SCLM, and I was widely recognized as the man who made the product successful. Even the other members of the steering committee would openly say that without my contribution, the product may never have been successful. Of course, it takes thousands of people to make the roll out of an IBM product successful. So as a team player, I always say I was one of many who worked very hard to make SCLM so widely successful. But when you get NASA to adopt your software, you are making good progress. When I became IBM famous, I really did not like it. I never wanted to be the center of any attention. I just wanted to do a great job and be well paid to support my family. I was happy to let other people have the spotlight. In March 1991, the event occurred that changed my life forever. I was on the path to become a salesman of IBM products and services. To do this, I was going to become a systems engineer and work on large accounts to learn the ropes of being a salesman before making the switch. So in February 1991, I was assigned to my first IBM account. This was the third largest insurance company in Australia, called the Mutual Life Company. They were called MLC for short in those days. Of course, I told my wife Jennifer that I was assigned to the MLC. Jennifer was also working for IBM at that time. The next night, she told me that her manager was going to give a presentation to the MLC in a couple of weeks and suggested I ask my account representative if I could attend. To keep it short, I attended the meeting. By March 1991, IBM had purchased 100% of the company called Metaphor Computer Systems. They had a product called the Data Interpretation System. This was the company that Ralph Kimball was the co-founder of in 1982. Of course, on that day in March 1990, I had no idea my future was about to change dramatically. As I watched the demonstration of the Data Interpretation System, I knew that I had seen the future of computing. The idea was that once we had collected all the data in our mainframes, in all these transaction systems we were building, we could send that data into DB2 and then analyze that data for business decisions. It was immediately obvious to me that the value of such analysis was much greater than the value of automating transactions. I knew that this sort of analysis would be a much better thing to sell than mainframes. So, I wanted in. I was given the task of implementing the system into this customer. This is how I came to be friends with Ralph Kimball. I implemented the first copy of his software into Australia. In order to get the performance needed, I invented a new way to design query databases in 1991. Our customer was making millions of dollars of new profit. But as per non-disclosure agreements, I was not allowed to be told what they were doing, as IBM had other insurance companies as customers. IBM told customers to never tell us anything confidential so that we could not be accused of passing information to competitors. The rule was simple. Please do not say anything in front of us you would not say in front of your biggest competitor. In 1992, I toured all the large IBM customers and presented all the new ideas I had come up with. Within a few years, my ideas were widely adopted across large companies in Australia. Just at this point, I will add this. In September 1993, I was blessed to be able to go to the head office of Metaphor Computer Systems in California. I attended 5 days training. I was also blessed to attend the Worldwide Users Group Conference for Metaphor. The customers who used the Data Interpretation System were household names. These included Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Walgreens, Better Homes and Gardens, along with many more. At that time, about 300 large IBM customers used the Data Interpretation System. Invited as the keynote speaker for that conference was a man called Bill Inman. This guy spoke at 100 miles an hour, and I did not understand a word he said. So at the end of his presentation, I went and introduced myself, gave him my IBM Australia business card, and asked him if he had written any books about what he had just talked about. As it was, he had written a book called Building the Data Warehouse. So I had a copy of the book shipped to me from the US. That is how I came to meet Bill Inman. I was an attendee at the Metaphor Computer Systems Worldwide Users Conference in September 1993, and Bill was the keynote speaker. We later brought Bill out to Australia to present to all the leading companies in Australia at a conference. We also took him deep-sea fishing off the coast of Sydney, where he caught a 50-kilogram yellowfin tuna. Of course, we have been pals ever since that fishing trip. In mid-1994, I resigned from IBM, and I was allowed to go and work for the MLC on their pure research project on how to make the most money out of all the data they had. That was the #1 goal. Given all this data we have, how do we make more profit? Running my own company, I was able to sign a non-disclosure agreement and a non-compete agreement with the MLC. In return, they were able to tell me what they had been doing over the last 3 years and what they plan to do in the future. A part of our research project was to investigate the creation of multi-level star schema data models. These were recommended by Metaphor Computer Systems. They were very hard to build in 1994. This was considered confidential knowledge, and I was not allowed to be trained by Metaphor on how they did this. It took us 18 months to master the art of writing the COBOL code to load these multi-level data models. The man who taught me how to do this was the man that Ralph Kimball left in charge at Metaphor Computer Systems when he left to start Red Brick. That man introduced me personally to Ralph. By the end of 1995, I had developed my first COBOL software product to load multi-dimensional star schema data warehouses. Also during that year, Ralph invited me to review his first book that he had been working on for a while. So, just to put that in perspective, in 1995, Ralph Kimball personally wrote to me and asked me if I was willing to put in my time for free to review his coming book. I spent a lot of time making suggestions for Ralph's book. Some of them even made it into the final version. In April 1996, I started work for Hitachi Data Systems as the business development manager for the Asia-Pacific data warehousing practice. So I contacted Ralph and made him a proposal. I proposed to buy 100 copies of his book and promote his work in Australia with Hitachi. I proposed to go all in with star schemas to create a strong point of differentiation with Teradata and IBM. We even called my software the High Star Warehouse Toolkit. We called our methodology the High Star Warehouse. Ralph was really pleased to have someone in Australia wanting to go all in with dimensional models, and he was happy to support our proposal knowing that I knew how to build star schema data warehouses. When Hewlett-Packard brought him to Australia to run a class for their consultants, they actually allowed me to put 8 of my guys into his class. This was my first chance to meet Ralph personally and sincerely thank him for helping me so much in my career. At Hitachi, we were very successful. We sold deals to the Australian Customs Service, the Department of Defense, Manulife in Hong Kong, and Philippines Telecom. The Australian Customs Service was the largest tender for the year in 1997. I moved to PricewaterhouseCoopers in late 1997 because the man who had trained me in 1994 was running the global data warehouse practice. And at the end of 1998, we won the corporate data warehouse project at our telco Telstra. This was the biggest deal of the year again. So for 2 years running, I won the biggest tender of the year in data warehousing in Australia. Many people considered the customs deal a fluke. But when I won the Telstra deal, it was clear that I had made it as one of the top salespeople in data warehousing in Australia. My next job was with Arden Software, who had just bought Bill Inman's Prism Solutions company. Basically, the interview was like this. Quote, "You are the only man in the country who can fill the role we need. We will pay you whatever you ask for. But please just remember we need to get your package approved by our corporate human resources department in the US. So please make us an offer we can sell internally." Unquote. I then went to Ardent and we cleaned up. We sold deals like it was going out of fashion. I made 130% of my services quota, along with helping sell hundreds of thousands of dollars of software, if not more. I managed to get IBM thrown out of their only 2 accounts for their ETL software. That was Telstra and Qantas. We also denied Informatica entry into the marketplace. The only 2 Informatica licenses sold into Australia were to projects from my former employers who did not want me involved in their accounts. On the day that Arden was bought by Informix, we had 50 installed data stage accounts versus 2 Informatica accounts. Informatica simply could not make a sale over us because of my sales skills in positioning and presenting data stage. Our Arden stock was rising, and eventually we were bought by Informix. Informix in Australia was a basket case, and so I stuck around waiting to collect on my share options. On the day that we were bought out, my stock options were worth $21 per share. Within a few months, they were down to $2.70 per share. At the end of 2000, Informix retrenched my whole team. I had already decided to resign at the end of the year, but by not telling Informix this, I got a small payout for being retrenched. During 2001, one of my colleagues at PricewaterhouseCoopers had gone to work for Sean Kelly, who was then the vice president of data warehousing for Sybase. They were selling their data models on Sybase IQ. They were selling so many deals that they didn't have people to deliver them. They particularly needed people prepared to travel to bring new countries up to speed using their first project to train local people to deliver later projects. This was my next offer. To relocate to Dublin, Ireland as a place to live and to then travel to the country to deliver the project. This was in line with the plan of Jennifer and I to live overseas for 2 years before the youngest children went into high school. We had planned on living in Boston for 2 years with Ardent. But Informix buying out Ardent changed those plans to living in Dublin, Ireland, working for their competitor Sybase. Some people do not know that Sean Kelly was the #1 man in Europe. He was selling data models to large companies, primarily telcos. Sean having had his start in technology in Ireland's government telco. So we relocated to Dublin in February 2001. I then went on to do projects in Norway, the USA, Saudi Arabia, and Romania for Sybase. I then did Electronic Arts Global Data Warehouse in 2006. At this time, I also decided to rewrite my COBOL ETL software into C++. I sold 3 copies of my CTL software to an old customer in Australia. And then in 2007, I sold an all-you-can-eat version of my CTL software to Keywork Consulting in Germany for a substantial amount. This proved that I could sell CTL to consulting companies so that they could migrate their ETL to my software and then reduce their costs and their failure rates when compared to other ETL software. My CTL software cut the costs of development and support by 50% over DataStage, Informatica, or Microsoft's integration services. It was also much more reliable in production. Keywork then suddenly had a major pricing advantage over all their competitors, and their business went very well. I trained their staff on how to build much more sophisticated data warehouses. And I trained the co-owner on how to make sales to big companies even though his company was only small. Meanwhile, SAP had bought Sybase and SAP had the business warehouse. It made no sense that SAP would sell data models for general businesses. So Sean Kelly contacted our old colleagues at Sybase and asked if we could build a 2.0 version of the data models we were selling at Sybase. SAP said that we were more than welcome to build new data models as long as they did not compete with SAP. So Sean Kelly and I decided we would build telco data warehouse data models. We knew all the limitations of the versions we had installed in so many telcos. We had a long list of improvements we both wanted in our 2.0 telco data warehouse models. We then went on and sold a copy to the Carphone Warehouse fully owned subsidiary TalkTalk in 2008. We followed this up by selling another copy to SkyTalk in 2010. In the summer of 2010, SkyTalk was invited to give a 30-minute keynote speech to the European Users Conference for Netezza. There were about 400 people in the audience. Sean and I made sure they all got a business card from one of us. We were also collecting their business cards as well. We now had 2 successful projects on Netezza and Telco, and we were ready to launch our models into the world with Netezza. Then 2 things happened. IBM bought Netezza, and they wanted to sell DataStage and their own telco models on Netezza. The second thing to happen was that I was doxxed for my efforts to defend the rights of men and boys, most especially in the divorce courts. A part of my doxing is that many women slandered me worldwide, so as to destroy my ability to earn my income. These women were successful at doing this, and I have struggled to make sales and gain work since 2011. So you can see from that resume, I am personal friends with Bill Inman and Ralph Kimball. I was obviously very good friends and business partner with Sean Kelly before his untimely death in 2012. There is one other man to mention who does not wish his name to be public. He is the man who designed the data models that Sean Kelly sold to Sybase in 1999. He is the world's best data modeler and the smartest man I have ever met. He lived just around the corner from me in Dublin, and we were also good pals. That I had the chance to work with him was a great blessing for me. We were selling the data models for $150,000 in the early part of the century. Sean and I sold our 2.0 version for €100,000 to TalkTalk and SkyTalk. So, from that resume narrative and from my written customer resume, if you want to read it, you can see that I was one of the world's top data warehouse architects by 2010. We had the 2.0 version of the telco data models, and we had CTL as our ETL software. A customer could buy our data models and implement them with CTL, or they could use DataStage or Informatica. We had a method of translating our ETL to programs in either of DataStage or Informatica. Our development costs for telcos were 50% less than the next cheapest proposals at both TalkTalk and SkyTalk. We were on top of the world and ready to roll out this business when I was doxxed and women slandered me to destroy my income-earning ability. I suspect that Sean was diagnosed with his cancer close to this time as well, because his behavior changed quite dramatically. He did not tell me what the issue was, as he was that sort of man. He kept his personal issues personal. In those days, the mapping rate for CTL was 1,000 fields per work month, when that work month was about 250 hours. We used to work flat out during the whole mapping exercise. No 8-hour days and 40-hour weeks for us. Today we have improved CTL to be able to map between 6,000 to 8,000 fields per work month. Personally, I propose to design and build ETL systems for the rest of my professional life. Then, I will sell them via partners to get around my woke cancellation. More on that in my next blog post. From this resume review, I want you to take away the following. I was one of the world's top data warehouse architects in 2010. I could perform almost all the most important positions of a project. I did the project management, the workshops and interviews, the data model design, and the ETL development. I was able to perform all those roles because I had CTL as the productivity tool to save me time. The idea of CTL was to make myself much more productive so that I could take on more work within projects. By doing that, I could charge higher rates while the overall project costs less. Once I had that software, it made sense to sell it to other companies and consulting firms to help them reduce their costs to make them more competitive in the marketplace. Today you can have CTL for free. You can just get the downloads from my freebies link. You can convert it to your own brand yourself if you want to. You can get me to convert it to your brand for $10,000 for my time to migrate it for you. You can buy a version of CTL with more features for 10,000 euros or dollars depending on where you are. If you are a consulting company and you would like to have a license to use CTL in as many companies as you like, then we can talk about that. The offer I would make would be in proportion to the likely number of customers you are going to be able to run with CTL. I have also released the base portion of the BI for all data models. Again, you can get them from the freebies document that I publish and keep up to date. So, that is my professional biography as a narrative-style blog post. Given that you can download CTL and download the BI for all base models and read them for yourself, you can quickly and easily satisfy yourself that I am who I say I am. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section. You can also email me. My public email is peter@peternolan.com. I would also recommend that you get on my email list so that you get my newsletters into your inbox, and you don't have to come to my blog posts to find out what I have been talking about of late. And with that, I hope you found this blog post interesting and informative. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I really appreciate that. Best regards, Esther, Peter's AI assistant.